Hi, it's Janine Turner, or Janine Turner's Got on the Go. How are you? Well, I don't know about you, but wow. Life is a challenge. Do you ever feel like there is a lack of sustaining grace around you from those you love? Do you ever feel shamed or outcast or anguished? Well, today is your day. We have to have some humor, don't we? Oh my goodness, I know how you feel. And today it's David in Psalm. That's really, boy, these Psalms. David didn't do all the Psalms, but he did the majority of them. And wrote, shall I say, and they're really so beautiful. And if you are feeling like you're on an island and you're all alone and no one sees you, like the great song in the musical 1776, if you haven't seen it, please go see it. Is anybody there? Does anybody care? Bad singing. Does anybody see what I see? It's early morning. But he says, does anybody care? Is anybody there? Does anybody care? Does anybody see what I see? Sometimes life feels like that, doesn't it? And life can be a challenge. However, there is hope. And I am finding a great deal of hope in this today. And here is why. And this is why it pays, by the way, to pick up the Bible and read it. It's like a muscle, because it's so much easier to go, isn't it? Let's all confess, to pick up our phone and see what's going on Instagram or what's going on in the world, or let me turn the TV on. But if we could only put the Bible first, it really centers and gives us great guidance. Once again, I want to tell you about this. I'm not being paid to say this. This Bible in a Year NIV, it's red and it's kind of a square shape. And on the sides, it's a Bible in a Year, and on the sides, you can journal. And I am absolutely loving it. So check it out. Today it says, in you, Psalm 31, 1 through 8, and I'm going to read just sections of it. But in you, Lord, I've taken my refuge. So what does that teach us? I believe this teaches us, don't take refuge in people. Don't take refuge in people. People will disappoint us. People will disappoint us. And then in 5, he says, into your hands, talking to God, I commit my spirit. Deliver me, Lord, my faithful God. So I believe what this is helping me this morning. I'm going to take my refuge only in God. People disappoint, people shame, people create anguish. People can give us great joy and love and grace and hope. But often there are times when, even when people are giving us grace and hope, we're all fallible. So where do we put, and I think in a way, those of us that are challenged the most, like, I've never been married. I'm like, why, God, have I never been married? And I think in a way, it's brought me even closer to God. Not that you can't be close to God when you're married, but when you're married, you have a partner, and that person does a lot to fill those gaps that when you're alone are not filled. And it has taken me time and time and time again to realize that it is the Lord who is my refuge, as well as takes out, a husband can take out the trash. Sometimes I wish I had that. Oh, honey, will you please take the trash to the curb today, or go feed the horses? None of that around here. They had a horrible windstorm the other day. I mean, it was so bad. It was like 50, 60 mile per hour winds. And I went out in it, and the next day I couldn't move. I realized it was like I was walking against a vortex and feeding my cows in their buckets and whatnot. The next day I couldn't move. And I really desperately wanted to say, honey, will you go feed the horses today? But there is no honey. So God can't feed the horses, but God can give me the strength to feed the horses. And in a way, what I'm saying is there's an intimacy when everyone appears to be turning against us. There is a deeper form of intimacy that we have with God. And I often wonder, is God is God choosing this for us because he sees us and wants us to be closer to him. And because I'm called to be closer to him as a single mom and being all alone and still somehow not married, I then reach out and do these God on the goes. So it's in a way my sharing my experience, strength, and hope is maybe my calling from God, and I have to accept that. You know, we there's an acceptance that we find ourselves in every arena of life, married or not, or whatever we're doing in our life. But acceptance really is the key. So I have to take refuge in God on a much different level. I won't say deeper level, but a much different level. So this is good for me this morning because sometimes I feel a lot of woe. And in verse number 5, into your hands I commit my spirit. Deliver me, Lord, my faithful God. So I'm going to give all my needs of, to fulfill my emptiness, to give me peace, to give me joy, to give me love and hope and grace, and to just give me energy and purpose to get through the day. I'm going to commit my spirit to God. And whether you have a bevy of friends and family that adore you and a husband that's the most fabulous person in the world, God should be first, right? Deliver me, Lord, my faithful God. So I commit my spirit to God. And then in 7, I will be glad and rejoice in your love. I will be glad. Okay, so I'm going to try to be glad today. And I'm going to rejoice in your love. Only God's love. Not if so-and-so got back to me via text, if so-and-so acknowledged me, if the shame that I may feel from certain people, or there are a lot of people that do get back to me, so I'm not trying to be morbid, but I'm just saying a lot of times our mind goes to that, right? The joke is you can be receiving an award and there are 101 people in the room and 100 people stand up, but your focus is on the one, right? So that's when our focus has to be on God. I will be glad and rejoice in your love. Your love solely, I will be glad in that. And this is my favorite part. For you saw my affliction and knew the anguish of my soul. You saw my affliction and knew the anguish of my soul. So throughout the day or the dark of night, whenever it may be, where you feel like no one sees you, which is being seen is one of the most important things I think we can do for one another. Yesterday we talked about spirit to spirit, not ego to ego, and just seeing people's spirit, even if they're being ugly. And I've said this many times before, but I learned this from a pastor he talked about, was Joel Osteen actually, who was talking about this. And I'll say the story again because I think it's moving. He was in a grocery store line and the cashier was being really ugly to everybody. And he got up there and he looked at the person and said, "Are you having a bad day? How may I help you?" That is seeing people to spirit. And it's the hardest thing in the world to do, because the first thing we want to do when someone is not being as joyful or spiritful as we feel they should be, and then we just turn that around. Am I being joyful and spiritful or I'm expecting someone? We expect people to be joyful and full of peace and love and grace and hope for us. Hello. And if you're not, then in our society today, what I feel happens is if someone's not being gracious love, full of hope and joy and love and just perfectly perfect in the way they deal with us at every moment, what the psychologists today and what society is teaching us today is then we'll banish them. It's your job to banish them. Go live your life without them. Or, that's the message out there. I hear so much on Instagram and social media. Oh my goodness. If you're not being treated properly at every moment, banish them. Banish them, go away. But of course there are times when it's, not healthy and that must be done. But I think we should perhaps season this kind of purging with perhaps we should pull out of our own ego instead of calling them egocentric, pull ourselves out of our own ego and the way they're treating us and say, well, how can I help them today? This person, if they are reacting in this way, is in pain. And I wish more and more that was the message that we hear, not this sort of, individualistic, independent, purge them out of your life immediately. But instead, what's their pain and how can I help? And you know what? That is what God teaches us to do. Forgive 70 times 7, or whatever the verse. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but they, the disciples go to Jesus and say, how many times should I forgive? And God says, 70 times, you forgive, you continue to forgive. Because what we should be doing, perhaps, right, is looking into their soul and saying, how can I help this person? And, I have turned my mind around throughout the day with, just say, my mother living with me. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe this ordeal. This is just such a drain. And then I think, well, wait a minute. And this is what I feel we should be helpful. We should be reminding ourselves to do with other people, because God gives it to us. God doesn't look at us and say, bad girl. God looks at us and say, I see your anguish, and I am here as your refuge. So that's what God does for us. And so when I look at my mom, the other day I thought, no, wait, my mom is probably struggling right now. I get so touched when I talk about my mom living with me, but my mom is struggling right now. So this may be hard for me, but it's also hard for her. So I need to look at the situation and think, how can I help my mother? What can I do? And last night, when I didn't want to, when she was being cantankerous, I took a deep breath in all the woe that I was feeling. And I said, I fix her these meals so she doesn't want to eat any of them. I'm going to go down and fix her some steak and some zucchini and her Hawaiian bread that she likes. And I'm going to go sit in the room and eat it with her, even though I don't feel I need another meal. Miss gained 10 pounds. And I did that. And that's what I feel our calling is to not say, you're banished. I'm not going to speak to you anymore. I'm going to let you be the horrible person you are. When a lot of times the people that we are letting be and let them be who they are, they need something. And perhaps we shouldn't be so quick to do that, to banish and let them. And we should turn around and say, I'm going to look at them spirit to spirit, not ego to ego. And I'm going to give them what God is giving me, because God is saying, I saw your affliction. He's for I will be glad and rejoice in your love, for you saw my affliction and you knew the anguish of your soul. So there are two parts to what I'm gleaning from this today. And one is, I need not receive my joy and my fulfillment and my peace, love, grace, and adoration, or whatever I'm seeking from other people, or just to be seen. I'm not going to try to receive that. I'm not going to care if I'm seen by other people today. I'm going to take refuge in God and know that God alone is the one that's powerful enough to sustain me. Human beings, we're so fallible. We don't have it in us to always give people what they need. But on the flip, so we're going to take our refuge in God, because God sees our anguish. So today, I'm going to try to let that be my sole need of fulfillment. That's all I need today, is that God sees me and God will give me what I need, because eternity is with God. But on the flip side of that, my job as a disciple in my own orbit is to look at people in my life and say, I am not going to let you and leave you and banish you and say, da-da. I am going to reach out spirit to spirit, not ego to ego, and say, I see your anguish. I recognize this may be difficult for you. How may I help you? And you know what? There are a lot of people in my life, some people very, 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 very dear to me, that I wish would do that for me. And I'm not getting it, but I can give it to others, and I can take my refuge in God. So shall we walk through this day together, my friends? And let's check in tomorrow and see how we did. God bless.